Have you ever wondered what differentiates someone who is truly chosen by God? Are there clear signs, unique characteristics that make them stand out from the crowd? In this video, we'll explore the 5 most striking characteristics that all of God's chosen possess. With inspiring examples of biblical characters like David, who faced giants, and Esther, who risked everything for her people, we'll relate these virtues to the modern challenges we face today. Discover how these characteristics can transform your life and guide you to live at the center of God's purpose. Are you ready to identify these qualities and perhaps even realize that they are already present in you? Stay with me until the end, because this video could change your perspective and help you walk with more faith and confidence. Being chosen by God is something extraordinary and challenging at the same time. Often, the chosen people are not the most qualified in human eyes, but those who have a heart willing to obey and trust in the Lord. This truth is repeated throughout the scriptures, showing that God does not see as man sees. When we look at the biblical examples, we realize a pattern. God chooses those who, even with flaws and limitations, are capable of surrendering to his purpose. Moses, for example, was a stutterer and feared to lead, but God called him to deliver Israel from Egypt. This teaches us that God's call does not depend on our ability, but on our availability. David is another classic example. Before becoming king, he was just a young shepherd boy, seemingly insignificant. However, God saw something in David that others couldn't, a pure heart full of faith. This choice shows that God doesn't choose based on status or abilities, but by character and willingness to follow his will. Today, many people ask themselves, "Am I chosen by God?" This question is often accompanied by doubts about one's worth and purpose in life. The answer lies in realizing that being chosen doesn't mean being exempt from difficulties, but rather being prepared to face challenges with the strength that comes from on high. A common characteristic among God's chosen is that they are often called to missions that seem impossible. This is because, by accomplishing the impossible, God demonstrates his power through the lives of those he has chosen. This not only glorifies God's name, but also inspires others to seek a deeper relationship with him. Another important point is that those chosen go through a process of preparation. Before taking on his role as deliverer, Moses spent 40 years in the desert tending sheep. This time was not a punishment, but divine training to mold his character and strengthen his dependence on God. This shows that the process is an essential part of the calling. In the same way, David spent years being persecuted by Saul before being crowned king. During this time, he developed resilience, trust in God, and the ability to lead. In this way, God uses challenges to polish the chosen ones, turning their weaknesses into strengths and their fears into courage. The chosen are also characterized by a deep sense of mission. They understand that they have been called to something greater than themselves. This awareness drives them forward, even when they face opposition or seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Therefore, the introduction to the characteristics of the chosen reveals to us that God does not call the perfect, but those who trust in him. Being chosen means carrying a divine purpose, facing challenges with courage, and allowing God to work through our lives. It's a journey that requires faith, patience, and total surrender to the Lord. Faith is the foundation of the life of any person chosen by God. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Hebrews 11 verse 6. This absolute trust in the Lord is what sustains the chosen in times of uncertainty, challenges, and even extreme danger. Unshakable faith is a hallmark of those who live to fulfill God's purposes. One of the most striking examples of faith in the Bible is that of Abraham, who was called by God to leave his land and go to a place he didn't even know. Without hesitation, Abraham obeyed, showing that true faith is closely linked to obedience. He believed in God's promises, even when it seemed impossible that they would be fulfilled, as in the case of Isaac's birth in his old age. Abraham also teaches us that faith is tested. When God asked him to sacrifice Isaac, Abraham showed such great trust in the Lord that he was willing to give up what he loved most. He believed that God could resurrect his son, showing that faith is not limited to what we see, but to what we believe is possible with God. Unshakable faith doesn't eliminate moments of doubt or fear, but it gives you the strength to carry on even when circumstances say otherwise. When Moses was called to deliver the people from Egypt, He was afraid and questioned his ability. However, his faith in God made him persevere and lead millions of people to freedom. This teaches us that faith is not the absence of fear, but the decision to trust God in spite of it. Nowadays, having unshakable faith means believing that God is in control, even in the midst of chaos. We face challenges such as illness, financial loss, and uncertainty, but faith reminds us that God has a greater plan and that all things work together for good for those who love Him. Romans 8 verse 28. Another important characteristic of unwavering faith is that it inspires others around us. When a person lives with trust in God, their attitude reflects hope, peace, and determination, even in the midst of adversity. This is what happened to Joshua and Caleb, who, by trusting in God's promises, encouraged the people not to fear the giants in the promised land. Faith is also a powerful weapon against discouragement and despair. The chosen know that with God, there is always a way out, even when all seems lost. They learn to wait on the Lord, as David declares in Psalm 40 verse 1. I waited patiently for the Lord, and He inclined to me and heard my cry. Having unwavering faith, however, is not something that happens overnight. It's a process that grows as we face challenges and see God at work in our lives. With each victory, faith grows stronger, enabling the chosen ones to face even greater battles in the future. In short, unshakable faith is what sets the chosen apart. It is what sustains them, guides them, and strengthens them to fulfill the divine call. Regardless of the circumstances, they stand firm, trusting that God is faithful to fulfill His promises. Courage and resilience are qualities that go hand in hand and define those who are chosen by God. Being chosen means facing challenges that often seem insurmountable. Courage is needed to take the first step towards the divine call, while resilience is indispensable to stand firm even in the face of adversity. One of the best-known examples of courage in the Bible is that of David facing Goliath. He was just a young shepherd boy, with no armor or military training, but he trusted completely in God's power. This trust gave David the courage to face a giant that an entire nation feared. His famous declaration, "The Lord will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine," 1 Samuel 17 verse 37, reveals that the courage of the chosen comes from their faith in the God who calls them. Courage, however, is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. When Joshua was called to lead the people of Israel after the death of Moses, God told him, "Be strong and courageous," Joshua 1 verse 9. This shows that even the chosen can feel fear, but they need to remember that God is with them, strengthening them at every step. Resilience, on the other hand, is the ability to endure hardship and keep going. The chosen often face long periods of trial before seeing God's promises fulfilled. David, before becoming king, was persecuted by Saul for years. During this time, he learnt to depend on God, developing a resilience that prepared him to lead with wisdom and humility. Resilience is also evident in the life of Job, who lost everything he had but remained faithful to God. He endured pain, loss, and criticism from friends, but his trust in God's character never wavered. Job is a clear example that the chosen are not spared the storms, but have the strength to face and overcome them. In our lives, courage and resilience are essential for dealing with challenges such as loss, rejection, and failure. The chosen understand that every difficulty is an opportunity to grow in strength and faith. As Paul wrote in Romans 5 verses 3-4, tribulation produces perseverance, perseverance, approved character, and approved character, hope. Furthermore, these characteristics inspire others. When the chosen show courage and resilience, even in times of adversity, they become living witnesses of God's power. This not only strengthens the faith of those around them, but also glorifies the Lord's name. It's important to remember that courage and resilience don't come from ourselves, but from God. He equips us with His strength to face challenges that, humanly speaking, would be impossible to overcome. This is why Paul declared, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," Philippians 4 verse 13. In short, God's chosen possess a courage that defies fear and a resilience that resists discouragement. These qualities enable them to face giants, cross deserts, and persevere until God's purpose is fulfilled in their lives. Having a clear purpose is an essential characteristic of those chosen by God. They don't live without direction, but understand that they have been called to fulfill a divine plan. This clarity of purpose brings focus and determination, allowing them to stand firm, even when circumstances seem unfavorable. Esther is a perfect example of someone who understood her purpose. When she was made Queen of Persia, she could have ignored the crisis facing her people. However, guided by her uncle Mordecai, she realized that she had been chosen for such a time as this. Esther 4 verse 14. Her clear purpose gave her the courage to risk her life to save the Jews. Another biblical example is Nehemiah, who, on learning of the destruction of Jerusalem, realized that his purpose was to lead the rebuilding of the city walls. He faced opposition, mockery, and even death threats, but he didn't deviate from his mission. His story teaches us that divine purpose gives us the strength to carry on, even in the face of obstacles. Having a clear purpose doesn't mean that the chosen ones know all the details of God's plan. Often, they only receive an initial direction, like Abraham, who was called to leave his land without knowing where he was going. However, they trust that God will reveal the next step at the right time. Humility is another indispensable characteristic of the chosen. Being called by God is not a reason for pride, but for recognizing total dependence on Him. Jesus, the greatest example of humility, washed his disciples' feet and served others, even though he was the Son of God. He taught us that greatness in God's kingdom is measured by service. David also showed humility on his journey. Even after being anointed king, he continued to serve Saul and waited patiently for God's time to take the throne. This humility kept him in line with God's purpose and showed that he fully trusted in God's sovereignty. The chosen understand that their mission is not about themselves, but about glorifying God and blessing others. Esther didn't save her people to gain recognition, and Nehemiah didn't rebuild the walls to gain fame. They acted with humility, knowing that they were just instruments in God's hands. Humility also means recognizing our limitations and seeking God's guidance in everything. Moses, despite being a great leader, always went back to God in prayer, asking for wisdom and direction. This constant dependence on the Lord is what keeps the chosen ones on the right path. In short, God's chosen ones have a clear purpose that guides them in every decision, and humility that keeps them focused on what really matters. These characteristics make them effective instruments in God's hands, allowing them to fulfill their mission in a powerful and impactful way. And so we conclude this journey through the 5 characteristics that define God's true chosen ones. I hope these reflections have inspired you to look inwards and recognize the gifts and virtues that God has already placed in your life. Remember, being chosen doesn't mean a life without challenges, but rather a journey full of purpose, faith, and transformation. May you continue to seek to grow in your spiritual journey, and may these characteristics be a beacon that guides you. If you liked this content, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Let us know in the comments which of these characteristics touched your heart the most, or if you know of others that also define a chosen one of God. See you in the next video. May God bless your life and strengthen you always. See you again. Folded hands sparkles.